Most people think they miss California. They look at the prices, they shake their heads, and they move on. But what if I told you that the next wave of California real estate wealth is already forming? Right now, in towns that barely anyone is talking about. My cousin works in commercial real estate, and a few months back he said something that stopped me cold. He said, "The biggest mistake most people make isn't buying the wrong house. It's buying in the wrong town, 5 years too late." That hit different. Number 10, Visalia, Tulare County. Let's start in the Central Valley, in a town that's been quietly building its case for years without ever getting the credit it deserves. Visalia sits close enough to Sequoia National Park that it's become a genuine gateway destination. And that single geographical fact is starting to catch serious investor attention in ways that go well beyond standard long-term rentals. Vacation rental demand here has been climbing steadily, driven by visitors who want easy access to one of the country's most visited national parks without paying the inflated prices you'd find in towns sitting directly at the park entrance. That gap between what visitors want and what they're willing to pay is exactly where opportunity lives. But here's what makes Visalia genuinely interesting rather than just another tourist-adjacent town. It hasn't become a one-note vacation spot. The local economy underneath the tourism layer is real and functional. Local agriculture still anchors the surrounding region, providing a stable employment base that doesn't evaporate the moment travel trends shift. The downtown area has held on to real character too. Local shops, lived-in restaurants, the kind of authentic texture that manufactured resort towns spend millions trying to fake and never quite pull off. Because Tulare County as a whole remains significantly more affordable than coastal California. Buyers getting in here now are entering at a price point that leaves genuine room for appreciation as more people continue getting priced out of pricier markets further west. What makes Visalia particularly compelling right now is that rare dual identity, a functioning agricultural hub with a growing tourism angle layered on top. Those two growth stories working simultaneously in the same market is uncommon enough to attract serious outside attention once investors start looking closely. And as interest in outdoor recreation and national park access continues growing across the country, towns positioned like Visalia tend to benefit disproportionately compared to more generic inland cities. If you're looking for a market where two separate tailwinds are pushing in the same direction at the same time, Visalia's combination of agricultural stability and rising park tourism makes a genuinely compelling case for what's building here. Number 9, Modesto, Stanislaus County. This next city has spent the last several years quietly absorbing overflow from two of California's most expensive regions, and the numbers behind that shift are becoming very difficult to ignore. Modesto sits in the Central Valley, positioned close enough to both the Bay Area and Sacramento that it's become a natural landing spot for anyone priced out of either market, but still needing reasonable access to both. Think about that for a second. You have two of the most expensive real estate markets in the entire country pushing people outward simultaneously, and Modesto sits right in that path. Population growth here has been steady, and rental demand has been climbing right alongside it. A combination that signals real, sustainable momentum rather than some short-lived speculative bubble. Because Modesto offers genuinely affordable entry points compared to almost anywhere closer to the coast, buyers are increasingly treating it less like a fallback option and more like an intentional long-term play. The local economy has diversified meaningfully over the years too, moving beyond its agricultural roots into logistics and other sectors that provide more stable and varied employment for residents. What matters most here is the source of the growth, because so much of Modesto's recent momentum has come from real people relocating from pricier parts of the state rather than speculative investors flipping properties. The housing market has stayed relatively grounded compared to some flashier, more volatile markets elsewhere. Local infrastructure has been slowly catching up with that population growth too, with new development following genuine demand rather than leading it artificially. That distinction matters enormously. Markets where development chases real demand tend to be considerably more durable than markets built on speculation alone. Investors tracking Central Valley markets have started grouping Modesto alongside Stockton as one of the clearest examples of demand-driven growth happening away from the coast. If steady population growth paired with real affordability sounds like the kind of foundation you want to get into before prices start climbing, Modesto's quiet momentum makes a strong case for moving before that story gets any more widely told. Number 8. Stockton, San Joaquin County. Before we go further, if towns like these are genuinely making you rethink where smart money might be moving in California, go ahead and subscribe right now because I have plenty more data-backed breakdowns exactly like this one lined up and ready to go. Now, Stockton. This city sits in one of the most strategically valuable positions in the entire Central Valley, tucked directly between the Bay Area and Sacramento, a location that's increasingly becoming one of its most powerful long-term advantages. As both of those larger, more expensive markets continue pushing residents outward, Stockton keeps showing up as the logical destination for people who need to stay within reasonable commuting range of either job center without absorbing either market's price tag. But the story here goes well beyond just geography. Downtown revitalization has been a major part of Stockton's transformation over recent years, with new housing development and redevelopment projects actively working to reshape the city's image after decades of being either overlooked or written off entirely by outside investors. Local officials and developers have been putting real money into downtown infrastructure, which is a meaningful signal. When local decision-makers back a city's trajectory with actual public investment rather than just hopeful press releases, it tends to indicate genuine confidence in long-term outcomes rather than short-term optics. Because so much of Stockton's recent momentum has come from actual policy and development decisions rather than pure speculation, the growth here feels considerably more grounded than markets driven purely by outside investor hype. The city's affordability compared to both the Bay Area and Sacramento remains a major draw too, especially for buyers and renters who need to stay within a reasonable commuting distance of either job market. What makes Stockton particularly compelling right now is that specific combination of strategic geography and active reinvestment, two factors that tend to reinforce each other rather than existing separately. As more people continue getting priced out of Sacramento and the Bay Area alike, cities sitting directly between those two markets tend to absorb a disproportionate share of that overflow demand. Stockton's long-term case keeps building quietly and steadily, even as most people still overlook it entirely. Number 7. Fresno County. Here's where it starts getting more interesting. This next city has spent years actively working to shake its reputation as purely an agricultural town, and the infrastructure numbers behind that transformation are genuinely hard to dismiss at this point. Fresno has been diversifying its economy in meaningful ways, expanding well beyond farming into healthcare and education, two sectors that tend to provide considerably more stable long-term employment than agriculture alone ever could. When a city's job base expands into healthcare and education, you're looking at employment that holds up across economic cycles, not just boom periods. Significant infrastructure investment has been pouring into Fresno alongside that economic diversification, with urban revitalization projects specifically designed to modernize downtown and attract both new residents and outside business investment. Because coastal California markets have reached prices that analysts increasingly describe as stratospheric, Fresno offers investors and buyers alike a considerably more accessible entry point without needing to completely sacrifice access to genuine economic opportunity. The city's strategic position within the Central Valley gives it real logistical advantages too, sitting close enough to major transportation routes and a growing regional population to support continued long-term development in ways that smaller, more isolated towns simply can't. Because so much of Fresno's growth has been backed by actual infrastructure spending rather than just speculative buzz, analysts have increasingly described it as positioned for sustained real estate appreciation rather than just a short-term wave. Local schools and healthcare systems have expanded alongside the population too, giving new residents genuine reasons to stay long-term rather than treating the city as a temporary, budget-driven stopover. That retention factor matters more than people realize. Markets where people actually want to put down roots tend to build value more consistently than markets that attract temporary residents. What makes Fresno particularly interesting right now is the sheer scale of its economic diversification. A city large enough to support serious infrastructure investment while still remaining considerably more affordable than almost anywhere along the coast. If economic diversification paired with serious infrastructure investment sounds like the kind of foundation worth betting on, Fresno's ongoing transformation makes a genuinely strong case for what's still coming. Number 6, Bakersfield, Kern County. Pay close attention to this one, because this is where the cash flow conversation starts. Bakersfield has quietly become one of the more talked about markets among serious real estate investors. And once you see the actual rental yield numbers involved, that attention makes complete sense. The city's economy has long been anchored by a strong energy sector, but that foundation has increasingly been supplemented by logistics, agriculture, and other expanding industries that add real diversity to the local job market. Here's the number that makes investors stop scrolling. Rental yields in Bakersfield have been consistently landing somewhere in the 8 to 10% range. To put that in context, rental yields in most coastal California cities struggle to break 3 to 4%. Finding 8 to 10% in a California market with real economic diversification underneath it is genuinely rare. Because property prices here remain comparatively low while rental demand stays consistently strong, Bakersfield delivers the specific combination that cash flow-focused investors particularly value: actual income rather than purely betting on future appreciation. First-time buyers have been drawn here too, specifically because their budgets stretch dramatically further than anywhere closer to Los Angeles, giving the local housing market a genuinely broad base of both investors and everyday residents. Residential and commercial development have both been picking up pace recently, adding new inventory without completely eroding the affordability that's made this city so attractive to buyers and investors alike. Because Bakersfield's growth has been driven by real diversified industry rather than pure speculation, analysts increasingly view it as a genuinely sustainable long-term market rather than a short-term flash in the pan. The city's connection to both Los Angeles and the Central Coast adds further appeal, giving residents reasonable access to bigger city amenities without permanently absorbing those bigger city price tags. What makes Bakersfield particularly compelling right now is that specific combination of strong rental yields and genuine economic diversification, two factors that don't always show up in the same market at the same time. If cash flow potential paired with real sustainable economic growth sounds like exactly what you'd want before a market starts heating up further, Bakersfield's numbers make an increasingly difficult case to ignore. Number 5, Riverside, Inland Empire. We're getting into the more dramatic momentum stories now, and this next region comes up consistently whenever serious investors discuss where genuine value still exists within reasonable driving distance of Los Angeles. Riverside sits at the heart of the Inland Empire, and the single most important thing to understand about this market is the pressure sitting behind it. When you have Los Angeles and Orange County continuing to push prices to levels that genuinely price out middle-class buyers and renters, that pressure has to go somewhere. And for years, it's been going directly into Riverside. Housing demand has been steadily pushing outward from the coast, and Riverside has become one of the clearest beneficiaries of that broader migration pattern across all of Southern California. Because renters and buyers alike are increasingly seeking lower costs without completely sacrificing access to major employment hubs, Riverside offers a genuinely compelling middle ground that's very difficult to replicate anywhere closer to the coast. Steady population growth here continues reinforcing investor confidence too, since consistent demand is a far more reliable signal than short-term speculative interest alone. The broader Inland Empire region has seen ongoing development as well, expanding housing stock and commercial infrastructure at a pace that's kept up reasonably well with that growing population. Because Riverside offers both a strong rental market and genuine long-term appreciation potential, investors increasingly describe it as a top pick for diversified portfolios rather than just a single strategy play. Local job growth has diversified significantly here too, moving well beyond just serving as a bedroom community for Los Angeles commuters into a genuine regional economic center in its own right. That distinction, from dependent suburb to independent economic hub, is one of the most important transformations a market can make. What makes Riverside particularly compelling right now is how directly its growth ties back to broader Southern California affordability pressures, a structural trend that shows no real signs of reversing anytime soon. If you're looking for a market benefiting from one of the clearest, most consistent migration patterns happening anywhere in the entire state, Riverside and the broader Inland Empire continue building an increasingly strong case for sustained, long-term growth. Number 4, Lemon Grove, San Diego County. We're almost into the final stretch now, and if these numbers are genuinely changing how you think about where California's next opportunities might actually be, Go ahead and subscribe because what's coming in the top 3 only gets stronger from here. Lemon Grove sits quietly between La Mesa and Spring Valley, and for years it's been genuinely overlooked, sitting in the shadow of pricier, more talked about neighboring communities throughout San Diego County. But that's rapidly starting to change. La Mesa's home prices have surged past $850,000, and that number is pushing increasingly priced-out buyers to seriously consider Lemon Grove for the first time. The city offers direct access to San Diego's Trolley Orange Line, which means residents get genuine, convenient transit access into the greater San Diego job market without relying entirely on a car. In a region where traffic is a daily reality, that kind of transit access carries real value for renters and buyers alike. Established neighborhoods throughout Lemon Grove maintain real small-town character too, something that's become increasingly rare and increasingly valuable throughout the more heavily developed parts of San Diego County. Here's the part that should get your attention. The city itself has committed $45 million specifically toward Main Street revitalization, along with park improvements and pedestrian infrastructure upgrades. That's not a rumor. That's not a hope. That's a serious, documented financial commitment that signals genuine institutional confidence in the area's long-term trajectory. New coffee shops, breweries, and local restaurants have already started opening throughout the community. Exactly the kind of early cultural momentum that tends to precede more significant price appreciation in emerging neighborhoods. Because Lemon Grove currently sits priced noticeably below comparable San Diego County communities, buyers getting in right now are entering before that $45 million infrastructure investment fully plays out and reshapes the area's overall appeal. Local real estate analysts specifically point to this combination: trolley access, genuine infrastructure spending, and rising demand from priced-out neighboring buyers as a textbook setup for the kind of transformation that's already happened in other previously overlooked San Diego neighborhoods. If you want proof that serious money is already betting on a specific transformation happening here, Lemon Grove's $45 million revitalization commitment makes that case as clearly as almost any town on this entire list. Number 3, Oceanside, North San Diego County. This next city offers something genuinely rare within San Diego County: real coastal access paired with pricing that's remained noticeably more reasonable than its more famous neighboring beach communities. Think about what that actually means. Coastal real estate in Southern California is one of the most sought-after property categories in the entire country. And yet, Oceanside has somehow maintained affordability relative to nearby markets while still sitting directly on the Pacific coast. That gap doesn't last forever. Oceanside sits in North San Diego County, and downtown redevelopment here has been steadily reshaping the city's identity, bringing genuine new life into areas that had previously been considered fairly unremarkable compared to nearby La Jolla or Del March. New restaurants, shops, and public spaces have been transforming the downtown experience, gradually shifting the city's reputation from purely a military-adjacent town into a genuinely appealing coastal destination in its own right. Proximity to Camp Pendleton adds a unique layer of economic stability too. The military base provides consistent housing demand from service members and their families that tends to hold up regardless of what's happening in broader real estate markets elsewhere. That built-in demand floor is a meaningful advantage in any market, but it's especially valuable in a coastal market where prices can otherwise be highly sensitive to economic fluctuations. Local infrastructure improvements have continued alongside that redevelopment, with the city actively investing in public spaces and amenities that support both the growing residential population and the increasing tourist interest simultaneously. Because Oceanside sits positioned as one of the more affordable coastal options remaining anywhere in Southern California, it's specifically being flagged by real estate analysts as a market to watch closely over the coming years. The combination of military-driven housing stability and genuine tourism momentum gives Oceanside a somewhat unique dual foundation that not many other coastal towns can currently claim. What makes Oceanside particularly interesting right now is how much genuine redevelopment has already been completed here. Not just planned, not just proposed, but actually finished and actively reshaping how people perceive the city today. If coastal access paired with real, ongoing redevelopment and unusual economic stability sounds like a combination worth getting into before the rest of the market figures it out, Oceanside continues building one of San Diego County's most quietly underrated cases. Number 2, El Cajon, San Diego County. We're almost at the very top of this list, and this next city might offer one of the clearest, most direct comparisons to a previously overlooked neighborhood that already transformed dramatically, right nearby, within the same county. El Cajon sits as what local analysts specifically describe as an undervalued East County access point. And the comparison being drawn consistently is to North Park, a San Diego neighborhood that experienced sudden cultural momentum and rapid price appreciation roughly a decade ago. If you know North Park's story, you know exactly why this comparison matters. What happened there followed a very specific, very recognizable pattern. New infrastructure arrived, younger families moved in, independent retail and dining followed shortly after, and property values climbed steadily as a direct result. Downtown revitalization projects in El Cajon are actively completing right now, alongside Grossmont Center's major mixed-use redevelopment phase, both expected to fully open sometime between 2026 and 2027. Because that specific timeline lines up so closely with when major redevelopment projects are set to finish, real estate professionals are specifically advising buyers to move before those projects complete, in order to capture the maximum possible upside before prices fully adjust to the new reality. Within El Cajon itself, certain subareas like Fletcher Hills and Rancho San Diego are being specifically highlighted for offering better school access and closer proximity to these newer retail developments currently under construction. The North Park comparison carries real weight precisely because that neighborhood's transformation followed almost the exact same pattern being observed in El Cajon right now, and North Park wasn't theoretical. It already happened. The appreciation was documented. The timeline was real. Because this transformation is actively unfolding in real time rather than existing as some distant future possibility. The window for getting in before prices fully catch up appears to be narrowing, specifically as these major projects approach their completion dates. Local real estate professionals with decades of experience watching San Diego neighborhoods transform have specifically flagged El Cajon as following that same predictable, well-documented pattern almost exactly. If you want a market where the exact playbook for future appreciation has already played out successfully just a few miles away, El Cajon's current trajectory makes an extremely well-documented case for what's coming next. And that brings us to number one. Number one, Sacramento. Here we are. The city that consistently comes up as California's most compelling emerging investment market. And the reason is simple. The numbers behind it are almost impossible to argue against. Sacramento holds a structural advantage that most other California cities simply can't replicate. As the actual state capital, over 200,000 state employees call this region home, providing a genuinely recession-resistant employment base that keeps housing demand stable even during broader economic downturns. That matters more than almost any other single factor in real estate investing. A demand floor that doesn't disappear when the economy gets difficult. But Sacramento's story in recent years has gone well beyond government stability. The city has been experiencing unprecedented private sector expansion, with companies like Amazon, Apple, and Tesla all announcing significant investments throughout the region. Amazon's massive fulfillment center alone created thousands of new local jobs. Exactly the kind of large-scale, anchor employer investment that reshapes a regional economy over the long term. Because Sacramento combines that stable government employment base with genuine large-scale private sector growth, investors here get something genuinely rare. Both immediate rental stability and serious long-term appreciation potential operating simultaneously. Most markets offer one or the other. Sacramento offers both at the same time. The broader Sacramento area, including its rapidly growing suburbs, has become a genuine magnet for families and professionals getting priced out of both the Bay Area and Southern California. People specifically searching for that combination of real affordability and genuine economic opportunity that's become almost impossible to find anywhere closer to the coast. Sacramento's suburbs have been specifically highlighted by analysts too, since job centers expanding throughout the region continue creating suburban spillover opportunities with relatively affordable entry prices compared to the urban core itself. Because this growth is being driven by such a genuinely diverse combination of government stability, major tech investment, and broader statewide affordability pressure pushing residents inland, Sacramento's case doesn't rely on just one single factor the way some other emerging markets might. That diversification of growth drivers is exactly what makes a market durable across different economic conditions rather than vulnerable to any single disruption. Local real estate professionals specifically point to Sacramento as one of the best rental markets in the entire state for investors seeking consistent cash flow, precisely because that government employment base provides a level of stability that purely private sector-driven markets simply cannot match. What makes Sacramento the number one pick on this entire list is the sheer scale and diversity of everything currently working in its favor at the exact same time. Stable government jobs, major tech investment, genuine affordability compared to the coast, strong rental demand, and a growing suburban market, all converging on a single city simultaneously. That kind of convergence is rare. When you find it, you pay attention.